We walk on it pretty much every single day, but have you ever stopped to think about what's really going on in the ground right under our feet? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig in, literally, and explore that hidden world of soil. And more importantly, we're going to learn how to check its pulse, to actually measure its health and its vitality.
So, how can you actually tell if soil is healthy? I mean, is it the color, the way it feels? And yeah, those are definitely clues, but the real answer isn't about looking at soil as just dirt. It's about seeing it for what it is, a bustling, thriving ecosystem. And the secret? It's all about measuring how much life it contains.
Now, the official term for this is soil biological activity. It's basically the collective hum of every living thing in the soil, from microscopic bacteria all the way up to earthworms. This activity is the engine that drives everything. It's what makes nutrients available and helps plants grow. It's simple, really. A more active soil is a healthier soil. So here's our game plan. We're going to give you a complete toolkit with 4 really practical methods to measure all this activity. First, we'll touch on what makes soil alive in the first place. Then we'll get into an earthworm census, a really clever teabag test, a simple chemical reaction, and finally, a way to measure the actual breath of the soil. So what is it that actually makes soil alive? Well, it's a massive, invisible world of microorganisms. I'm talking billions of them in a single handful. These tiny powerhouses are working 24/7, decomposing organic matter like fallen leaves. And as they do that, they release all these essential nutrients that plants need to thrive. Without this microbial workforce, soil would just be sterile dust.
This chart gives us a fantastic bird's-eye view of the 4 methods we're going to cover. It shows you how they stack up against each other in terms of cost, difficulty, and accuracy. And as you can see, they range from the super simple earthworm count all the way to the much more precise soda lime method. So there's really a tool here for just about any situation.
All right, our first tool is the earthworm census. You really can think of earthworms as the visible engineers of the soil. They are constantly burrowing, mixing, and digesting organic matter. And in the process, they create this fertile, well-structured ground. A simple head count can actually tell you a whole lot about the health of the entire ecosystem down there.
And the great news is, you absolutely do not need a fancy lab for this. All you need are a few simple things: a spade, a tape measure, and a plastic sheet. Oh, and that optional mustard solution? That's a great pro tip. It doesn't hurt the worms at all, but it does encourage any of the deep burrowers to come up to the surface so you can get a more accurate count.
The process itself is incredibly straightforward. You just mark out a square meter, dig down about the length of a trowel, and then carefully sort through all the soil. You count every single worm you find, and that number gives you a direct snapshot of how many of these crucial soil builders are living in that spot.
So the biggest advantage here is just how easy and accessible this is. Anyone can do it. The downside, though, is that it only gives you a tiny glimpse of the full picture by focusing on just one type of organism. Plus, your results can change a lot depending on things like how wet or dry the soil is that day.
Okay, our second method is, honestly, brilliant. We're going to give a teabag one final scientific task. It's a clever way to use a standard teabag to measure the rate of decomposition, or, in other words, to see how fast the soil's microbes are eating. And this just goes to show how simple field science can be. All you're going to need are some teabags, and the type does matter for consistency, a scale, and a few pegs so you can remember where you buried your little experiment. Now, this procedure is definitely an exercise in patience. You weigh a dry teabag, you bury it about 7 centimeters deep, and then you wait for 3 months. After that, you dig it back up, dry it out completely, and weigh it again. The amount of weight that's been lost is a direct measure of how much biological activity has been happening. More weight loss means more active microbes were munching away. The huge advantage here is just sheer simplicity. Pretty much anyone can do this. But it's not perfect. The teabag itself can create a slightly different environment than the soil right next to it, and its mesh might actually keep some of the larger decomposer organisms out. All right, for our third tool, we're going to get into some kitchen-level chemistry to measure something called active carbon. The easiest way to think about this is as the fast food for soil microbes. It's the ready-to-use energy source, so more active carbon means you've got a happier, more energetic microbial community. So, our key ingredient is a chemical called potassium permanganate. Now, it's an oxidizing agent, but all you really need to know is that it starts off as this really deep, vibrant purple liquid. The whole process feels a lot like a science class experiment. You take a little bit of soil, add that purple liquid, shake it like crazy for 2 minutes, and then you just let it settle. The reaction happens right there in front of your eyes. So where's the magic?
I mean, how does this color change tell us anything about the life in the soil? Well, the answer is beautifully counterintuitive. And here it is, the less purple the final solution is, the healthier your soil is. So why is that? It's because the active carbon in the soil has reacted with and literally used up that purple chemical. So a fainter color means there was more active carbon to begin with, which indicates a much more biologically thriving soil. Cool, right?
Okay, our final and most advanced method involves measuring the soil's breath. It's true. Just like us, the organisms in the soil respire. They take inorganic matter and they exhale carbon dioxide. By capturing and measuring that CO2, we can get a really accurate reading of the total biological activity.
Now, don't be intimidated by the chemistry on this slide. The key takeaway is simple. We use a substance called soda lime, which is incredibly good at trapping carbon dioxide. So as the soil breathes out CO2, the soda lime grabs it, and that causes it to get just a tiny bit heavier.
The procedure here is pretty meticulous. You place a chamber on the soil surface to trap the gas that's being released. Inside that chamber, you put a carefully pre-weighed dish of soda lime. After 24 hours, you come back, retrieve it, dry it out, and weigh it again. That tiny increase in weight, that's the actual weight of the CO2 that was exhaled by your soil.
The biggest advantage of this method is its accuracy. It gives you a precise, quantitative measurement. But the trade-off is the technical difficulty. Your results are heavily influenced by temperature and moisture, and you need a very precise scale to be able to detect those tiny changes in weight.
So there you have it, 4 totally different methods, from a simple head count of worms to a precise chemical measurement. And this isn't about one method being better than another. It's about having a complete toolkit so you can choose the right tool for the job to understand the life in your soil.
This summary really helps you choose that right tool. If you want a quick snapshot of the larger life forms, count the earthworms. For a simple long-term check on decomposition, bury a tea bag. If you need a rapid indicator of microbial fuel, use the active carbon test. And for the most accurate data on total activity, you're going to want to measure the soil's breath.
So we're going to end with this question. We've given you the tools to listen, to measure, and to understand the living ground beneath your feet. So now that you know how to check its pulse, what is your soil telling you?